Okay, kids, it's time for another episode of the Fueled by Weird podcast, the only podcast that is willing to take the journey through time and steam. My name is Chris Daly, and today I'd like to welcome Alin Silverwood, the writer and creator of Sky Guy and the Altitude Adjustors, and Ryan Best, the artist on the book. Guys, how are we going? How are we doing today?
Too bad.
Doing great, man.
Very cool.
Not too
Very
shabby.
cool. All right, guys. So I usually like to start these things off with an icebreaker question, and today's question is, what is one thing you could not live without?
God. Uh, my daughter,
Good answer.
my my kids. My kids are two things, but
That works.
but yeah.
Oh, I feel a lot of pressure to give a good answer now. I was going to say Taco Bell.
Right? Right?
I don't know. Music. I kind of live without music.
No,
That's a good
that's
one.
a good answer though.
That's a good one. I think for me, I'm just gonna be lame and say my phone because without my phone, it's hard to stay in touch with my daughters. It's hard to stay in touch with my wife. It's hard to stay in touch with the world. Make sure I'm on track. So, but yeah, all good answers. Very, very cool. All right,
A lot
guys.
of
Yeah.
start thinking about it.
That's a tough question. I like to ask the tough questions here.
Oh boy. Okay. Brace myself here.
All right, I'm gonna roll to an easy one now. So, when you guys aren't busy making comic books, what do you like to do in your spare time? What are some of your hobbies, your interests, stuff that you're into?
You want to go first on that one, right?
Sure. One of my hobbies is martial arts. I've been doing that since I was like 5. So just anything I
Nice.
can find wherever I'm at. I've done taekwondo, jujitsu, kickboxing, boxing. So that's like one of the things I use in my spare time, that and just working out in general.
Nice. Very cool.
It helps you draw some of those poses too, right? Because you know
Yeah,
what to do.
kind of. Yeah.
Good
Great.
for reference. Nice.
Uh, I like to read, and like I'm a very big consumer of content, reading or TV or movies and stuff. I'm taking in stuff a lot. I obviously I like to create and think and uh man, lately it's kind of weird. I've had a rough couple of years with my health, so it's like, what did I used to do a lot of? Yeah, I used to take walks, out in nature. We've got a lot of nature and stuff here, so I would take a lot of walks and do that kind of thing, which is good for the mind and the soul. But
Yeah.
not doing as much of that these days. But it doesn't mean it's still very very much something that I enjoy. But you know, pretty much a little bit of gaming. I've become a bit of a gamer. Um,
Nice.
yeah, I was always into D&D when I was young, and so you know, gaming has always been a thing for me. So some video games, app games, little D&D now, little Baldur's Gate, that kind of stuff.
Nice. I know my friend Dave who lives, I think if I remember correctly, he doesn't live too far from you. He's big into D&D. So,
Yeah.
very cool. I try to get into D&D, but the problem is where I live, everybody wants to play, but nobody wants to DM. So
Huh.
it makes it extremely difficult to try to get a good game of D&D going.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I
Yeah.
if I've got people who are willing to play, I'll DM. I don't mind. I've been DMing since I was a teen.
Nice.
For me, it's storytelling.
Yeah,
It's basically you're putting a story out. So I mean, it's a lot of work to it's a lot of work to set up.
sure.
You
Hmm.
got to put all that stuff together. That is definitely it's heavy duty work. But as long as the players are enjoying it, it's worthwhile.
I agree. All right, guys. So, Alan, I want to start with you. We're going to take a trip in the Wayback Machine to kind of go back and see where everything gets started at. So, what was it that originally got you interested in becoming a writer in the first place?
It's funny. I like to tell this story. The first thing I remember that relates to writing, I had to be like 4 or 5 years old, and I had these little pieces of paper, and I was drawing this guy. It's like a stick figure, and I gave him a sword and an upside down like trash can for armor, and he had to fight the garbage truck,
Mhm.
and it was like you know anthropomorphized, and it was the evil thing, and he was in this, and he used the lid, those old trash cans, so he used the lid for a shield and the trash can for armor, and he had a sword, and he had to fight this thing. And I was drawing these little things with stick figures and telling these little stories. I was like 5 years old. I mean, this is like one of my earliest memories too. Well, I remember things further back. I have weird memories that people don't usually go. Like I remember when I was like a year old. I'm like, I do. But yeah. So I was doing it. And then I would take like my action figures and stuff as I got older, and I would actually write little kind of like scenarios and stories for them in notebooks and things. And by the time I was like 8 years old, I was reading The Hobbit and comics and stuff. So I was already like, ooh, this is great stuff. I love stories and stuff. And I started kind of like having ideas for stories. And I mean, it's just always been there. And then in school, they would have you do creative writing, and I would do my creative writing. I would always turn it in late, and the teachers are always like, "Why can't you turn it in late?" And then they'd go up to the time where they'd pick a few out to read to the class. They always picked mine. I was one of those they always picked, and I'm going, well, somehow they like what I'm doing, even though I'm not as fast at it as everybody else.
Yeah,
And it's probably because I wanted to do things a certain way, and I'm very I get caught up in that to this day. But yeah, so it's just it's always been there. I've always been doing that, and I reached an age where I was in my early 20s, very early 20s, and I had gotten to be a very big fan of Marvel stuff. And I went down to San Diego. Back in those days, you could go to San Diego and actually talk to the editors and stuff. It was big, but it wasn't so big like it is now. And I started talking to Richard Starkings, who was over from Marvel UK. He was doing some stuff for them, and he was moving to the States, and we became friends. And then he went and moved to New York, and there was an opening at Marvel Comics, and for an assistant editor with Bobby Chase. So he's like, "Why don't you come here?" I was already working as an editor on magazines at that point, so I was like, "Sure, yeah, okay." So I'm like, that's what I'd like to do. So I moved there, and before I knew it, I had a job at Marvel Comics. Started right out in
that's
comics. It
incredible.
started at the top in comics, and then
That's
kind of
awesome.
worked my way to the bottom. So like fell out and climbed back in, and but yeah, so it's put out a couple of books, but yeah, I've been writing for a living for doing different kinds of writing and things for a living for I'm not writing and editing for 30 years, I guess.
That's cool.
It's a long, I mean, it's just, that's all I've ever known and done, really,
Sure.
pretty much. Uh,
Very cool. Ryan, what about you? What was it that got you inspired to become an artist?
I think it's a couple things. I don't remember ever not drawing. My parents were always very supportive of it, and we had subscriptions to Marvel Comics. We watched like all the Saturday morning cartoons with like Spider-Man, X-Men, stuff like that. And I think that's what the bug got me back then with all that. Just like I was just exposed to a bunch of cool stuff. My dad was an artist, and so both him and my mom were super supportive. And I just kept drawing and drawing and drawing and drawing. And eventually, like, I got to college and I found out, like, oh, you can actually do that for a job. And so then I started trying to pursue it from there.
Very cool. Now,
some
what was
people,
it?
some people can do a great job.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but you get that, but you got that talent thing going on.
Yeah, it was cool. In college, or right after college, I like mentored under a guy who was working for, I think he was working for DC at the time. And he taught me how to ink. He kind of gave me like a peek into like how comics work and stuff. And so that was like really my first like dipping my toes into like how practically can you do it.
Very cool. Now, Alan, you said you worked at Marvel for a little while. What's some of the I kind of want to, you and I have talked a little bit about some of the stuff you've done there, but I want, for the people who don't know, what's some of the stuff that you were able to work on with your time at Marvel?
Yeah. I was working on the Incredible Hulk, the run with Peter David and Dale Keown, where they did where basically he had Doc Samson shrink him and he became like Banner, and the Hulk became that one smart Hulk. I worked on that storyline coming up into that.
Nice.
Um, I worked on the revival of Ghost Rider, the first revival of Ghost Rider with Danny Ketch that Howard Mackey was writing. I came in
Oh
just as
man.
we were getting ready to launch that
My
series.
friend, my friend Hassel's going to be super jealous because not only is he a huge fan of Ghost Rider, he's actually a huge fan of Howard Mack and had him on his show not too long ago.
Howard's great. He was great. Actually, Howard gave me a couple of my bigger breaks there. He's
Nice.
just a great guy. Also, we were doing She-Hulk, and that was when Brian Hitch was kind of just starting out. So I had Steve Gerber and Brian Hitch, and Steve Gerber, legendary for Howard the Duck, and some of his quirky stuff was fun. That was fun to work with, and worked on GI Joe with Larry Hama, who's crazy genius, really, when it comes to storytelling, and he's very famous for that one, especially that one Snake Eyes issue that he was like, he wanted to show that you could do a whole issue with no dialogue at all and tell a story if you knew what you're doing with storytelling.
Yeah.
And so he did that issue, and it was like, do it. He did it. Um, but yeah, so that was the main stuff I was working on with Bobby Chase. But while I was there, I was able to do a few short stories that they knew I was from the West Coast, so I was really interested. I was very interested in the West Coast Avengers. I was a big Hawkeye fan back then, and the first thing I got to do as far as writing was for Howard Mackey and Len Kaminsky. They let me do an annual backup story with the West Coast Avengers. So that was pretty. That was. I was like, that was it. I was like, that was it. I was there, but and then I did, a few, like I did backup stories for the Avengers. I did backup stories for Thor, the New Warriors, some Spider-Man stuff, um, Hulk, and then I did some stories for Marvel Comics Presents. Couple of interesting stories I did for them, um, and that's it. I pitched a couple of series that went up the ladder pretty far, and they just didn't think I was ready, and I was pretty young, to be honest. I probably wasn't. I look back at my stuff now and I go, yeah, no, I thought I was, but it wasn't. But I was also like, I had gotten my parents both died like shortly after I was out of high school, so I had gotten married very young, and I had a lot of like really crazy personal stuff going on. I had gone running off to New York, and I needed to go back. I was from LA. I had to go back and handle that stuff. So I didn't really get to stay very long, and I, wanted to do things, and I just didn't get to. But that's the way life goes. Sometimes you don't always
Yeah.
get to. They takes you down different paths. I went from there. I wound up back in LA. Wound up in Hollywood working at Paramount Pictures, and had
Wow.
amazing experience. I worked on a lot of Star Trek stuff, and Titanic and Braveheart, Forrest Gump. I worked on just crazy and interesting, neat things there for a few years. So I like to say I went back. I went from Marvel to Hollywood before Marvel went to Hollywood.
Wow.
They hadn't really gone and made it. But I do remember, saying when I was working at Marvel, and they kept having people coming in going, "Oh, we want to try to do this character or this property as a movie and see if we can make it work." And there was all kinds of things. There was someone, they were trying to do a She-Hulk back then. They were trying to do a Ghost Rider thing back then, and all this stuff wasn't working. I'm like, if you guys are ever going to make it big in Hollywood, it's got to be Iron Man. He's going to be your bridge between superheroes and action films. That's your guy. He's the guy that fits. That's your guy. And it was like, well, Spider-Man movies did good, but what was the one that really broke them open? It was Iron Man. I'm
It
like,
was. Yes,
I
sir.
called it. I was like, yeah,
Did.
it makes sense to me. I'm like, that's the guy that will get people in, because he's doesn't. I mean, it's just basically it's tech, you know. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I can see people going for that, even if they're not a big fan of superhero stuff, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, but yeah, it's great.
Very cool. All right, guys. So, for today, what we want to talk about is you guys' new book, Sky Guy and the Altitude Adjusters, issue one. Um, for those who haven't heard of the book, why don't we talk a little bit about what the book is about?
It's yeah, I had this fascination, probably before they were even calling it steampunk. I had this fascination with this kind of thing that was developing, and I liked the aesthetic, and I'm like, this is kind of neat. I don't know what this is, you know. But it had this kind of Victorian looking stuff, but with this technology that never really existed, but it was kind of interesting and weird. And
Yeah.
I liked the kind of the quirky, weird, off realityness of it, but yet the kind of the historic feel too at the same time. And I got really interested in that, and I started playing around with it. And I had played when I was a teenager. I'd played, I was talking about role playing games. One of the games I played by TSR was a game called Gamma World, which was kind of post apocalyptic. Well, it was actually post apocalyptic. And I had some characters that I had created for that. And that's where Marbury, the big orange guy with the horns and the extra thumb, that's kind of where he comes from. He's like this character I created when I was, God, a teenager, I guess, older teen. But anyway, so these characters kind of rolled around in my head. And then a few years later, something happened. Somebody was talking about an attitude adjustment, in my head I heard altitude adjustment, and I'm like, what would an altitude adjustment be for? What would that look like? And my mind went straight to steampunk, and I'm like, okay. And it just kept, it just like it's one of those things that just like the tendrils just sprouted out. It's like, well, that would be this, and that would be. So I just like my mind just kind of starts going off with all this stuff, and it just like turned into a story, and all these characters came out of it, and uh it's just one of those things that just took off in my head, and it's the characters got up in my head and started walking around, kind of thing. They come to life and they have lives of their own, personalities of their own. I didn't do that to them; they just did it on their own. And so I sat on it for a while, and then I started going, well, I got to find an artist for this thing. I've got to try to do this. This is the thing I need to do. Like I was like, sure, this is the thing I was meant to do. It's like, yeah, I have these other things I want to do, the superhero book that I'm doing, that I absolutely love, but this was the special thing that I wanted to do, and I was like, I had to treat this right. And so I had kind of tried to work with a couple of artists, who did, some early concept sketches and ideas and stuff, and I was like kind of getting there. Um, and I don't remember, Ryan. I don't remember how I found you. I don't even remember now. Where did
I
I
was just trying to
find
think
you?
about that today too. I don't remember
Like,
exactly how you found me.
where did we first connect? I don't know, but Ryan, it was like I looked at his stuff and I was like, that's the magic is in there. It's in there. I could see the magic in there as far as what, like, there was a sparkle to I what I thought was the life that my book needed. And I was like, this is it. This is it. This is what I want. This is what I want it to look like. And and I, and Ryan drew some stuff for me, and I was like, this is it. This is the book. This is how we go with this book. This is how this book happens.
Very cool.
It's like I finally, and I'd gone through a few artists at that point, a few years of things. A couple of guys tried to draw the book for me. Guys I'd worked with on other things, and I liked working with them and everything. And they tried to draw the book, and they were like, they dropped out. They were just like, it was too much for them. I mean, I don't know. Is it really really hard to draw some steampunk stuff, or is it just certain people don't really glom onto it?
Let's talk about
Yeah.
that, Ryan. What was your kind of inspiration for, what you brought to the book?
I mean, I have a lot of interests. I like drawing in different genres and stuff. I've always been a big sci-fi fan. And I think like at its core, steampunk is basically just sci-fi. It's just with
Yeah,
like a different veneer on it, you know? And
right.
so for me, like a lot of the fun is kind of like creating a lot of the world, a lot of the tech. It doesn't have to be like super realistic, you know? As long as it's got it's kind of got like a rule of cool going on, where as long as it looks cool and you kind of tell like what the thing is, you can kind of just make up whatever you want. And I
Yeah.
really enjoy that. And I really enjoy like even in my sketchbooks, like I'll doodle like made up tech and stuff like that. I think maybe not everyone's like necessarily geared towards that. When I was like first thinking about being an artist, I actually considered doing like architecture or like industrial design, stuff like that. So like the technical stuff has always kind of like been there for me. I thought about being a concept artist for I remember reading like Star Trek the magazine and they'd have like, oh, how I designed this character, like spaceships and stuff like that. So all like the designy aspects, the technical aspects always like really interested me. And so in a book like this, I kind of get to stretch those muscles versus like a book that takes place in reality where everything has to look like stuff that's already around, you know?
Yeah. So when you were drawing this one, did you, when you were looking for inspiration, did you pull from anything specifically or kind of just pull it out of your imagination?
Um, I mean, a little bit of both. Obviously, like you're referencing like Victorian style stuff. So there's a lot of like looking up mainly like architecture, old school architecture, outfits, things like that. I'd actually worked on a Jack the Ripper comic
Oh,
not
nice.
too long before this, so I kind of already dipped my toes in like that styling. But now it's like you just get to add in, okay, now you get to make up a bunch of cool stuff on top of that. So that was just a lot of fun.
Very cool.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Alan, what about you? Did you have any specific properties or anything that you pulled from when you were putting together the story of Sky Guy?
Yeah, that's funny. I'm always thinking about that. I'm like, people always ask, well, people who, they always say they want you to say, well, people who like this will like this. It's like I'm going, man. I mean, there wasn't a lot. One of the things that I wanted was more steampunk stuff, stories. There weren't a lot of steampunk books. There weren't a lot of steampunk comics. There was what Lady Mechanica,
Yeah.
which is big and out and stuff. And
Yeah.
that was like so mind blowing to see. And I was like, well, that's that's something. But I'm like, that's not really what I wanted to do exactly.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm like, gosh, okay, what is this like? It's like, how do I, I'm like going, well, I mean, there's a little Indiana Jones in here. There's a little, um, I mean, I had a bunch of things the other day. I mean, there's going to be a little bit of The Last Airbender in here. Um, Maybe some Pirates of the Caribbean. Obviously, there's pirates. I'm like, so there's a few just odds and ends, and the fact is, these things were kind of in my mind connected to it after the fact because when I started thinking of it, it was just me thinking of what I wanted to do with the steampunk aesthetic. It's like, what would I
Yeah.
do with this if I didn't want to do straight, like just straight steampunk, just like the Wild Wild West movie. If I didn't want to just do something like it's the 1800s and this is just tech that could have been. I'm like, that's one way to go with it. But I'm like, I want to do something that was like a little more. That's why I wanted to add kind of the creature type of things.
Yeah.
And so I did that and then other things kind of like gelled. That's like there's another element going on here. Um, and there was this other idea I had for a comic book that would actually be like a prequel to this series, which would explain how the world of Sky Guy becomes the world of Sky Guy in the first place, which would be a whole fascinating story. If I ever get around to telling that story, it'd be a fascinating story all of its own. But it was really just kind of like I don't know, what my inspiration was. I mean, it was just other than just trying to tell a steampunk story that was interesting and had some, it like I said, eventually the characters kind of told me who they were, and the story just unfolded on its own, little by little pieces just kind of came together,
That's
which is
always kind of
great.
nice when you're writing a story when you kind of go in with a preconceived notion of this is how I want this character to be. When you start writing them, it's like, no, no, no. This is how the character is going to be. You let them tell you. That's always kind of a fun way to do it.
They'll throw you some surprises and some curveballs that way.
Yeah.
And I've enjoyed some of the stuff that's come out, because some of it's kind of humorous, some of it's kind of funny. It's like, each one of the team, the main team, the core team, they have like something that they're especially good at. And, we'll find out that there's a reason for not a reason for why they're especially good at one thing, but a reason for why they may be a little bit better than they should be. And Sky Guy is a pilot, but Sky Guy has a fear of heights. But that's his specialty is flying. He's like an ace pilot, but he's afraid of heights. Um, and that makes him for an interesting character. It's like I mean, in truth, that makes him kind of heroic right out of the gate, because here he is, a guy who's got to face his worst fear every day just to do what he does. Um, that makes him kind of interesting. But he's also a little what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say absent-minded, because he's not really absent-minded. Um, he's just maybe overconfident in
I
his
get that.
own abilities sometimes. Um, and you start to see this in the first issue. You start to see, you basically, it's kind of an introduction to the characters in the world. You start to kind of see them, and then we introduce this situation that you don't really know why it's happening, or you don't know much about it, just that it is. And that's the thing that you're going to want to follow up on. But it's these characters and this world that you're going to want to go through more of and with them on to learn that more. It's exponential. It just keeps, like, their adventure. It's just going to get better with every issue, because each thing opens up more and more surprises, more and more stuff that like nobody knows. They don't know. There's a lot of stuff that nobody knows, that just because of this one incident, it's going to blow open a lot of stuff. Um, I don't know where I was going with that, but that's
Okay, fair enough.
yeah.
Ryan, so when you were drawing this, did you have any particular characters or scenes or anything that, without sharing too many spoilers, that you like were your favorite to draw?
I think Marbury is my favorite to draw, to be honest. I really like drawing him.
Yeah.
Any scene that he's in is a lot of fun.
Did you have anything that gave you a little bit of trouble?
Um,
Maybe a little bit, just a little bit tricky, maybe.
I think, and Alan was kind of like alluding to this, is just that like with steampunk, it can just be a lot. Because everything's super detailed. All the outfits are
Yeah.
super detailed, the backgrounds are super detailed. There's so much stuff going on that you have to like pay attention in how you're kind of like plotting out your page so that it's not so detailed that it's distracting or that it takes too long to draw. So I think it's just figuring out like that, like planning everything out, making sure that like you're putting appropriate detail where you need it, not overwhelming yourself and not overwhelming the reader, I think was probably the most challenging part of the book.
Yeah, I bet definitely, making sure that, oh, they have this in this scene, but they don't have it in this scene. I got to make sure, got to like all the little tiny details of each character are probably a little bit tough to remember.
Mhm, mhm.
Very
It,
cool.
it is hard. I mean, even even writing it, I'm trying to go like, did I remember to meant to mention this to Ryan? Like, it's like, will that come up if I don't, like, oh boy, okay, hope I got that right. And it's like, there may be a couple little things that I'm like, okay, well, if I forgot it, it's like I forgot it. It's on me. But I think it's come together pretty amazing. And talking about the tech stuff, the tech side of stuff, I started thinking, it's like I'm like, I kind of had this need to explain. There are these arrow towns, I call them. They're
Okay.
the big floating city thing.
Yeah.
But they're kind of bowl shaped and they're ancient. They're so old that only people who are altitude adjusters, it's like this knowledge that's passed down, that they know how to like keep the altitude adjusted, which is keeping them floating at a certain point in the atmosphere that the people that live on them can continue to live on them. And they
Yeah.
don't come crashing down to the surface of the surface of of the world. But um, the the idea that like I had this like faux science technology baloney in my head about how they work, you know? And it's like, okay, I was like, I've got to have that drawn up. I got to do a schematic. So I had a schematic done up for like a mini poster for this first thing, which kind of just in a very, very loose and general sense explains kind of what happens. It's like, where does the steam come from that keeps them at, you know, it's like, how is this steam related? And it's like, well, there's these massive moisture collectors and they bring in the moisture and it goes through boilers and it comes out as steam and it generates turbine turns that are all the way around. Then it's like a clock because there's a turbine at like 12 different positions. So it's kind of like that clock thing a little bit. It alludes to some, kind of some tropes of the genre in a almost disguised way. But so I'm like this is the very most basic I can get. And then there's a certain thing, these things that they scoot around in these sky sloops. There's also going to be ships. You don't really see any bigger ships in the first issue. You will. Warning, Ryan. There will be bigger ships.
Nice.
But I try to keep things from getting too complicated. So I mean, they could definitely get a lot more intricate than I try to think of them.
Sure.
But in the end, I'm like, I don't want to kill my artist's hand. You know? It's like I don't want to burn them out or anything. So I'm like, well, where's the fine line, but that I can deliver this aesthetic without overdoing it. It's like Ryan was saying. It's like you don't want to overwhelm the reader's eyes either. You want what needs to stand out, and what doesn't have to stand out can kind of scale back in detail and such. Um, but yeah, I wanted to be able to show a little bit of what in my lunatic mind thought would be really good concepts for the mechanisms here. So there's a little bit more than just the ones that the Aerotown. I've got the mechanism idea for the sky sloops and for like one or two of the weapons that you see in the book and things like that. Um, in my mind has got something, and it's like I'm sure it's completely laughable, but that's part of the fun. I mean, I think that is kind of part of the fun of steampunk because
Yeah.
you can just blow stuff around. And then there's Tom, which is one of the most interesting things in the book. I think is that as it's turned out, is Tom is an automaton, and there's only certain things that like he should functionally be able to do, but he kind of starts to take on more more than what he should be able to do. And it's like, where is that coming from? Um, and that's like that's another story. Kind of the running joke that I had thought of is, I don't know if this will actually work or not, but the running joke with Tom is that he's always going to get damaged, and every so often he's going to get a little bit of an upgrade. So he'll constantly be like changing because he's always getting damaged, But I don't know. I don't know how much that's really gonna change. It's really more about something else with him. But each one of them is very. Each one of them has a very specific and interesting and distinct personality. Um, I mean, Loris, who creates him. I mean, in the first issue, it's not much of a spoiler. He gets his arm ripped off in an accident. In this accident that happens, it kind of is the catalyst for everything. And he had this other arm he was working on to upgrade Tom. And he winds up going, I'm going to need this for myself. But he looks at it as an upgrade for himself. It's like adding a mechanical arm as an upgrade rather than losing an arm. He didn't lose an arm; he gained a mechanical arm. Kind of a thing.
Yeah.
It's like that's going to be his take on that. That's where his mind is. He's kind of Loris is kind of think of him as being kind of on the spectrum, really.
Okay.
Um, he's he doesn't really. I mean, he's a technical wizard, but he's awkward with people. he's awkward with social stuff. And his sister, Serena, she has the same thing, but with weaponry. And she's not necessarily awkward with people, but she's feisty. She's definitely feisty. Um, and Marbury, who looks like this big brute, uh, he is anything but. I mean, he can certainly throw his muscle around, and he does, and he will. But he'd rather be curled up with a good book and some classical music or something somewhere. It's like it's that's just who he is. He's not really into being the big brute guy. So
Like a gentle giant kind of guy.
very much so. Yeah, very
Nice.
much so. And I mean, there's a little like how much do I want to say here? Uh, there's a little extra, each of them, as a team, they formed this little team, and there's this closeness between them. Like Marbury and Aaron Sky Guy, they obviously have a history and they're longtime friends and stuff. And
Sure.
Loris and Serena are brother and sister, um and Serena, there's some she's a complicated cat. uh, she's she's a complicated cat. I guess I'll leave it at that for now,
Okay.
but yeah, there's some interesting stuff that we hint at, and it'll unfold, but there's things about all of them that you find out. I mean, by the second issue, there's going to be some things that it's like, okay, this blows open a couple of things right away. You know, flat out. It's like, you have some preconceived notions going in, and I'll tell you right away that pretty much right off the bat with the second issue, I start blowing that apart. You know,
Nice.
but
Now, Ryan, when you're getting into the mindset to go and draw this book, do you have to, what's your process? Do you need to like kind of get in the mood to write steampunk or draw steampunk? How does that work when you're switching from, different genres?
I mean, I feel like the process is pretty much the same. I'll read the script and then I start out with thumbnail pages. They're smaller, so I'm not like too concerned about detail. And then
Yeah.
I just plot out the panels and get the flow of like, what's important, what's going in here kind of thing. And then I enlarge those up to, standard page size. And then I start adding in like the details and stuff like that. So honestly, like it's not that much different than a normal book. Um, until I get to like the final penciling stage where I am like putting all the little world building bits in there and all the tech bits in there. But like in terms of process, it's pretty much the same as any other book.
Nice. Very cool. All right, Alan. So, we've got issue one coming out. Today is the launch day. We're recording this on launch day. And so
yeah.
by the time this releases, it'll be about a week in. Um, how many, do you have like a set amount of issues planned for this? Do you have, is it a mini series? Do you see it kind of as a long running series? What do you think?
I mean, in my mind, I was actually trying to think about this just this afternoon. It's like, now let me see how many issues is this going to take to get to the point, the point, which is like, I don't see it as a just open ended, really. I mean, there could be more stories for sure after, but to get to the end of, I can't just tell one story. There's like several
Sure.
stories that
Yeah,
are
yeah.
happening. That this explodes this story and this story and this story, but this all will kind of like, you know, dovetail into a finale. I'm horrible at gauging how many issues that's going to be. I mean, it'd be great if I could say, it's 6 issues, boom, done. I haven't mapped that out. I know the story, but I haven't actually sat down and said, okay, let me block how many, like how many issues I need, like for all of these things, where this stuff goes. I've only done like, you know, the first 3 issues of that. The second issue is mostly written, and Ryan's already drawing it. Um, the third issue, I know what it needs. But like it's like when I get into it and I'm doing it, I'm like, okay, how many pages do I need for this? How many pages is this going to take? How much, how much, which things are going to need more room, which things don't require that much room. And I got to give it to Ryan, and Ryan, you know, kind of and move the bars up and down on that stuff. And then I get a pretty good idea how that's going to work out um, in order to tell the story effectively. Um, and keep it enchanting. Um, but yeah, it's in my mind, it's a limited series, you know.
This particular story is limited, but the possibilities of other stories within the same world, there's quite a bit to tell there, it sounds like.
But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty fleshed out. Well, like I said, I could go back and do a a prequel that goes centuries into the past
Oh wow.
and sets up how we wind up where we are when the story starts. Because it's like I said, it's kind of an ancient situation. It's like how far back did this thing start? Where did these Euro towns come from? Why are they there? You know, you probably can start to put two and two together by the time you've read a couple issues of the book, but you don't really know the whole story. You won't have any of that kind of detail because that's lost to history. But it's definitely it's definitely another story that in my mind I had as a separate story, and then I realized when I was doing this that it's like, oh, that's actually the same story, but like years earlier. I didn't even know that. It's just another story I had in mind, and it was like, and then I was doing this, and one day it just popped. It just popped together. I'm like, no, wait a minute, that is this world. It's just the beginning of this world. you know, it's like, and I hadn't even realized it until it dawned on me one morning. I
Yeah.
was like, no, that's actually the same world. And it's like, okay, it's just very different because it's so long ago, but
Yeah.
it's actually the perfect setup for what exists here.
That's very cool. And it's
Uh,
it's awesome to see there's more steampunk stories and steampunk's comics coming into the world. I've been a big fan of steampunk for a long time. Like you said, if you were to ask, an average comic book fan, name some steampunk comics, a lot of them are going to name Lady Mechanica, like you said. And there's not many others. I know our friends at In Symmetry Creations, they create a lot of steampunk comics. Shout out to Matt and Steph.
right.
Um,
It's Heirs of
but it
Isildur, which I think is on Kickstarter right now. Also,
It is on Kickstarter right now.
it's like their fourth issue, I think.
Yeah, I think it's issues 1 through 4. I think is what
Yeah,
they're doing right now.
yeah, yeah. And so
Um,
they got some steampunk in that. So,
they do. Speaking of Kickstarter, we mentioned you're launching today with this project for Sky Guy. Let's talk a little bit about the Kickstarter and what you've got available.
okay. Well, I've got you want to do variant covers, right?
Yeah,
There are, I mean, for me, it's like people sometimes go overboard. I'm like, give me the main cover and a couple of variants. I'm good.
yeah,
So I've got the main cover, which is Ryan, and it's perfect. It's an absolute perfect depiction of introducing these characters and these things in this world. Boom, one cover, straight up. Then I was like, I kind of wanted to do this, like, the original Star Wars poster,
yeah,
and I was like, going, well, okay, the number of characters is off, but there's like you've got the Death Star, which could be like an Arrow Town, and you've got these X-wings flying, which could be like the Sky Sloops, and then you've got kind of like you've got Han Solo and Leia and Chewbacca, and I'm going, oh, that's kind of like I'm like, let me see if I can get kind of a take on that put together. So I had Oliver De La Cruz who was doing something for me at the time. I was like, can you just do that kind of thing for me? Kind of like, for me, this story borders on manga, style or type of a tale.
Okay.
That's why I'm kind of like, it's like for me, there's a little bit of the last Airbender influence in there, because it's like that's not really, it's not hard manga, but it's kind of like it dips its toe in there, and I'm like, so I'm kind of
Nice.
like, so I didn't really do that with it, but he's got a little bit of that kind of like style going. So I was like, oh, I'll do that. And then I realized I needed another cover, and I was like, you know what I'm doing? I was doing the schematic thing, and I was like, it'd be really a cool cover. I hadn't thought about just doing like one character, and I was like, if I did, who would it be? And I'm like, who people really seem to be interested in when I show them around is Tom. And I'm like, well, Tom is kind of one of the more interesting stories in here. I mean, they're all interesting, but there's something extra fascinating about Tom. And I'm like going, Tom. And I'm like, what if there was like this kind of like this like coming to life techno drawing of Tom? And so I asked Ryan to come up with it, and he just did this, and this is outrageously awesome. It's like that's the Tom cover. I had sent it to you today. I
Yeah.
just started kind of showing that day. Kind of sat on it a little bit. I just started showing that off now. And it's just it's a jaw dropping cover. It's just amazing. He did such a
Yeah.
it's like such a perfect job. I'm like, what can you do with this, Ryan? And Ryan sends me back this masterpiece. You know,
Yeah,
it's
it's pretty incredible.
it
Kudos to you,
really
sir.
is.
It's
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 like,
awesome.
wow.
I just
Yeah.
saw it like right before our phone call today. So yeah, very good job, man.
Yeah,
That was awesome.
yeah, yeah. I was like, that's exactly it. And that's been one of the great things about working with Ryan. It's like he instinctively kind of like just kind of knows where to go with stuff on this.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing. It's always a pleasure to like I can't wait to see stuff come in from him. I'm like, I can't wait to see what this is going to look like now, you know. To me, drawing and art is magic. I
Absolutely.
I've never had that skill. I can tell a story, I can babble for days,
Sure.
but to sit there and make something that you can look at and you can get and it's beautiful, it's like I can't do that. And
Yeah.
uh, you know, I always wished I could, but
Me too.
so I've got the three covers. I was talking to, Madeline, who does Boston Metaphysical Society.
Hmm.
And she was like, "You need something metal in there," and I'm like, "Really? Okay." And she said, do these metal bookmarks. They're really cool, and people love them." And I'm going, "Okay, that's cool." So I went, and I got a really, I mean, this guy, I was, my landlady had her son was like doing a graphic design, logo design guy thing when I was first coming up with this thing. Um, I was like, I need the logo, and he designed this logo for me. I love it. So I'm like, let me use this. So I'm like, I could put it on a shirt, but I'm like, nah. I said, put it on. Get that in front of the thing. It's a metal bookmark.
That's cool.
These are really nice. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's really nice, and it's like it's a solid piece of metal too. It's nice, and it's like, and it looks good with the white and the
Yeah.
you know and the logo on there. So I made some of these, and I put some of those in there with I put them in as add-ons, and then there's some in there with like just with the main cover as a tier, but you can get them as an add-on or whatever. Um, uh, what else I got? I got a guy to do a little action figure of
Oh
Sky
yeah.
Guy. Now, of course, this for me was always like the biggest thing. I'm like, if I could ever do comics and then get action figures of my characters, that would be the end
Yeah.
all be all,
Absolutely.
So he did this neat little 3D rendering. I mean, he's like, I can do this and I can do a certain amount of these. And I'm like, I'll have to limit them, and I'll do them as an add-on, and I'll do one tier that's a limited tier with some of them. Um, but it's a little action figure of Sky Guy. It even comes with like the gun. So it's a low quantity, so it's not terribly cheap for an action figure, but it's not outrageous either. I was like, oh, it's actually, all right, but it'll be kind of neat. And it's just 5 points of articulation, turning the head and the shoulders and the hips, but I'm
Yeah.
like, but that's neat. That's cool. So I've got that in there. I was like, oh, those are cool. And I put in, as a stretch goal, I did that schematic. I'm going to do like a booklet as another stretch goal, which has the, um, which has some of the earlier drawings and concepts and things. And I wanted to show that off. And somebody said you could even take some of the black and white art and use it, and like people could color it. And I'm like going, well, if I do some of this other stuff that's in color, how am I going to put that together with stuff that people can color on? I'm like, I don't know if that's really good. But to be able to show and tell some of the stuff about how this stuff actually came together, and see some of the evolutions of earlier versions of these guys and stuff. I'm like,
Yeah.
that'll just be fun. So I'm like, so I just put that in there, and then some PDFs and stuff. Then I did. Ryan graciously offered to do some. I mean, this is very special. You can get art directly from Ryan as commissions. He's willing to do characters at two different sizes for uh, like I think there's what do we do like four at 11 by 7, 11 by something,
11 by 14 and 5 by 7.
11 by 14, 5 by
Nice.
7, four of each,
Yeah.
that he'll do, and you actually get the art. I mean, you can frame this, it's like
That's
that's
cool.
pretty special. Yeah, that's pretty amazing, and it's Ryan's art, so it's like it's gonna be gorgeous.
Yeah.
um And so we've got a few of those offered. And also, one of the things I've done in the past, people seem to love this. So I'm like, I'm going to throw these in there. It's like people like to do like um, a cameo appearance. And I've had people like go in some of my superhero books and stuff. People are like, "Can you use my character or whatever?" It's like, "Oh, yeah, we'll put that in yeah." Um, I did that with the Halloween Infinite Souls book, and I got quite a few characters in there that people were thrilled. They got to see the characters interacting with the characters in the story, and that was
Yeah.
with me and a bunch of other guys who do, indie comic stuff, and we put a bunch of our characters together, and all these other cameo guys came in. But in this one, I was like, well, you can do this cameo where you can appear as either a groundling, which is what Marbury is. He's like basically they're from the surface. They're more primitive. They don't look human. They come from the surface. So they're called groundlings, or very derogatorily, they're called ground monsters by people in the Arrowtowns. There's a little bit of animosity toward them. They're not well looked on. It's kind of not cool. But so you could be a groundling of some sort. And there tends to be kind of a little bit of an animal influence to some of them. So it's like, so you can kind of like, you know, you'll be in a scene as a groundling, or uh, as a pirate, as a steampunk pirate.
Cool.
You'll look like a steampunk pirate in a scene that
That's
that
awesome.
that is coming up. So I'm like, so there's a couple of different cameo options in the reward tiers. Um, but then, of course, there's the reward tier where you can get all three covers. There's the reward tier where you can get all three covers plus um, the bookmark plus um, the action figure. But there's only like so many of those because I have to limit the action figures.
Yeah.
We'll figure there's only so many of those. So it's like, if you want that, get in, but get in first. Um, like, am I forgetting anything? Uh, the commissions, the cameos, um, all the covers. I didn't go crazy with the tiers. I mean, I looked at some other campaigns that had a lot of stuff, and it's like, well, some of them it's because they had a big backlog in their book. And it's like,
Yeah.
and this is the first issue, so I don't have a lot of backlogs. I've got some add-ons. I put, like the other Pop Skull Productions books, you can get them as add-ons and stuff. So it's like if you want to see some of our other stuff that we've done, that's there. And that's actually still going on. But it just kind of got moved back. The last couple of years, I had to kind of step back and take a break. I had 3 surgeries in the last 2 years, and it wiped me out. It took everything
I'm
just to kind
sure.
of like get back. Now I'm like trying to make up for those 2 years and get all the stuff that I've kind of had put together. Like this book, Sky Guy. I mean, it was like finished. How was it like? Been like what, almost 2 years probably.
Yeah.
Um, it's been sitting finished, and I was like, I just wanted to wait and try to do it right. And I was like, I've got to get this out. I can't just keep sitting on it. It's like I was like, I'm trying to like figure out how to like, it's like maybe things will happen so that social media will become easier for me to And it's like it went the opposite direction. I'm going, this is just getting worse. I better just do it before it
Yeah.
gets any worse, you
Yeah.
know? So it's like, no, this has got to go out. But yeah, so it kind of I'm like trying to get a lot of stuff done now to make up for and get put a lot of stuff out that's kind of sitting around here. I'm going now. I got some stuff I can put out. So this year I've got like a few campaigns, ready to go.
Nice.
Second part of Infinite Souls, which I've done with several guys. Roy Johnson with Standard Comics and Rodney Lockett with Iron Gate, Mike Spagnola, and Carlos Raphael. Just, quite a bunch of us that had some Halloween themed characters.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
excited. Mike's a good guy, and I think my friend Jim was in the first book too.
yeah. Wait, which one? Which one was Jim's?
Jim Stone. I don't
Yeah,
remember.
yeah.
Yeah,
Did he do
yeah.
the Unknown Soldier one?
I don't remember which one he did.
I think he did. I think he did
I
the
can't
unknown hero
remember.
type of thing.
But
I'm
yeah,
not sure. I could be wrong,
I
but
remember seeing those books, and I they were pretty excited about it. So yeah, I'm definitely
yeah,
gonna have to jump in on that for sure.
yeah. So that second one is in progress, and that's
Nice.
kind of I was hoping to get that out by Halloween, but there was just a lot of stuff going on that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like I said, well, I'm moving into like after Sky Guy. I wanted to do Sky Guy first thing this year. So I'm like, so after the first issue, we'll do the next issue of Infinite Souls, jump back into the Spies Among Us universe because that's just kind of like left hanging, and it's got an issue sitting there like kind of like Sky Guy did as a complete issue, which is beautiful. And I'm like, and of course that is definitely just an ongoing story. That's got a long tail to go, a lot of stuff, and there's kind of a side book that kind of it's a little side journey that kind of illuminates a little bit of that story that it kind of needs that I
Nice.
wasn't going to introduce until later, but I'm going to do that now. And I've got that kind of started. So I've got, Sky Guy, Infinite Souls 2, Spies Among Us, the third book, and probably the second classified files book for that, plus the side book for that, and then come back around to the next issue of Sky Guy by the end of the year.
Very cool. What
Busy
about you,
year.
Ryan? What do you got coming other than, what other stuff are you working on?
So the main book I'm working on right now is a book called Rise, and we're about like halfway through issue three. I'm doing pencils and some colors on it.
Nice.
Yeah, it's kind of a very intimate look at like a superhero story. But it's kind of like it's not about like all the superhero stuff, so it's not like super villains and like crime fighting and all that. It's more about like the journey of the main character and just like finding out what it takes to be like a good man. The
Nice.
plot of that one is that like his powers are scaled with like the levels of dopamine in his blood.
Okay.
So he has to feel good to do good. And
Nice.
so initially he gets like big boosts. Oh yeah, there you go, right there. Um, he gets like big boosts from doing good things. He feels really good, but then it's like, okay, is that enough to sustain him like going forward? And what are the pitfalls and like trying to make yourself feel good? And can you be a good person like while you're chasing that high kind of thing? So it's a pretty deep book. I'm having a lot of fun on it. But yeah, it is more in like the your standard like superhero genre. It should look like pretty much like a book from the big two.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's Ryan work, so it's beautiful.
Yeah, it looks incredible.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, guys, before I let you go, I want to see if I can have both of you share a bit of advice with all the listeners about people who want to be creative. Like, what's a bit of creative advice that you would share?
Um, I mean, I would say I wish. I mean, if I'm thinking about like what I wish I had done more as advice, I wish that I had not not done what I wanted to do. In other words, if you've got something, do it. Find a way to do it. Don't let it sit for a long time. Don't let it sit for years. Be consistent. Start doing it and keep doing it. You know.
Advice. Ryan, what about you?
Yeah, I was actually gonna say the same thing. I mean, like, I think people wait too long and they think like, oh, when it's better, when it's better, when it's better, I'll do it. But you're never gonna get better unless you do it. So like a finished imperfect thing is better than a perfect thing that never gets put out in the world. So like no matter what, just make the thing. Even if it's like not what you want, just make it, put it out, and move on to the next thing.
That's awesome advice. Yeah, I've got some
Absolutely.
friends that come up with these really cool ideas, and I'm like, well, why don't you do something with them? And they're just like, it just needs some more time to percolate. And it's like, sure, in theory, you can, work it and rework it in your head and it gets better and better, but really, all you have is just this thing that doesn't exist. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really good advice to just jump out there and just get started doing your thing. That's really cool.
Yeah. It's, I mean, I sat on stuff for a lot of years. It's like, man, now I'm going, there's so much stuff I could have done and should have done and would have done, could have, should have, would have. And I'm just, you can kick yourself. It's like, oh, how
Yep.
much of this am I going to actually do now that I wanted to do? And it's like, you know,
Yep. I'm right there. I'm
working
right there
hard.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. It, just don't waste that time. Life is short and precious. Use it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, guys, where can we stay with you on social media and wherever to find what's coming from you guys?
Um, well, for me, I have a website for Popskull Press. It is undergoing an update. It's very outdated. I lost um, my webmaster. Didn't lose him. It's kind of like it doesn't. I had to change a bunch of my stuff, so I've got to redo it and build it. But it's popskullpress.com. But you can find me on Facebook right now. There's Facebook, Alin Silverwood. There's Facebook Popskull Press page. There's Facebook Alin Silverwood author page. So I'm definitely on the book right now. There is a website that it's just a very weak website for Sky Guy, but it's actually held up. There's some kind of technical thing. When it comes to technical stuff, man, I'm just like, unless I can make it up, I can't make it work. But yeah, so I mean, yes, I'm also on Instagram, Popskull Press. You know,
What about you, Ryan? Where can we find keep up to
I'm
date with
mainly
stuff you're
on
working on?
on Instagram at Ryan Best Art, and then I have a website ryanbestart.com. So if you just type in Ryan Best Art, you probably find me.
Very cool. All right, well, for me, I want to make sure we thank the band Polygon Horizon for the use of their song Pizza Force. It's the song we use for the show. It's a great song. Go check them out on Bandcamp. Give them some support. You can find Fueled by Weird on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, for as long as TikTok decides to be around, whatever. Shoot me an email at fueledbyweird@gmail.com. We can talk about all sorts of stuff, get you scheduled on the show, whatever you want to do. You can find the actual show, Fueled by Weird, on YouTube, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find me on the Spotlight Media GA app, along with the rest of the Stay Weird Network shows, the Nerdy Man Room show with Hassel and Monster, Hassel's Review, and Big Rob's House of Entertainment, and No Chinese Food, amongst a bunch of other shows we're putting out there that you can only find on the Stay Weird Network. And speaking of the Stay Weird Network, it's a brand new podcast network dedicated to bringing some awesome back to the internet. You can find us on Instagram at Stay Weird Media, find us on YouTube at Stay Weird Media, and shoot us an email at stayweirdmedia@gmail.com. Now, one last thing, I want to thank my sponsor, the Zone Collectibles in Tifton, Georgia. They're your one-stop shop for comics, collectibles, and so much more. Now, if you like the show, please leave a review and tell your friends because word of mouth is my friend. And remember, kids, life's too short to be normal, so stay weird. And make sure you check out Kickstarter for Sky Guy and the Altitude Adjusters, issue one. We'll make sure we put the link in the description so you can find it. We'll share it on social media. And the Kickstarter ends February 27th, which seems like a long ways away. But before you know it, we're going to be in springtime and you're going to be past the deadline. So make sure you don't wait and check it out today. Ryan, Allen, thanks so much for joining me tonight, guys. I really appreciate it.
thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Absolutely.